Good morning, everyone, or evening, or hello, 265 days from now. Welcome to the first episode of the Laying Lines podcast. And in this episode, we are going to do a spoiler read review of Judd by J.D. Toombs and Erika Schulze. I do apologize if I pronounced any of that wrong. Now, this book is about 223 pages, so it's a nice little lightweight read of what essentially I can say is probably the best young adult fantasy type book. And the reason why I say this is because their book takes place around a group of teenagers, and they live in a town where everybody has superpowers. It's common for everybody to have superpowers. So it's similar to other things like Sky High, My Hero Academia, and I would say that it pulls closer to Sky High when it comes to main character styles. And one of the things that I like to say about it is that it's got a great feeling about it. Everything about it feels natural, from the dialogue between the characters and how they interact. Because when I was reading it, I felt like I was thrown right back to high school. I mean, I can relate to the main character because I was one of those outcast type people that didn't really have a place to fit in. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And I'd say it being in high school like it is, it probably sets it up to where it's probably one of the most relatable books that a lot of people can read in young adult fantasy, because even though it has superpowers and a lot of everything that happens in it revolves around superpowers, like people act differently, and this, don't quote me on this, and I hope to God that the authors don't kill me for it, but everybody acts differently depending on what kind of power set they have, or in the book they call it auras, and you'll learn that pretty early on in the book, so slight spoiler, I guess, I don't know. I'd like to say that it's probably a pretty good coming of age story, and this is partially due to the hero's journey, has a lot to do with the character himself, and it teaches a lot about some of the stuff that I don't know how I'm trying to pronounce that, to be honest. It's just a really good coming of age story because of how the characters progress throughout the story. And it's not like they're not heavy changes either. Like, it's not like every chapter there's like a big major change. No, it's like these little slight variations with the characters throughout. And the characters change from, I like to think they changed paragraph to paragraph with everything that is said between them. And in my mind, I kind of related it to dialogue choices in an RPG game where one character will say something, and in the back of my mind, my brain goes, he will remember that, or she will remember that. And the book itself has a lot of really good LGBTQ plus representation in it. Like, not every single character is the same, and it doesn't focus, like, it's not heavily LGBTQ plus positive, but it's not heavily LGBTQ negative. And I like to think that's the benefit of having two authors, because they could have an author that's LGBTQ plus set and one that's not, and they could take experiences from both sides and implement it into this one story. So, to me, the representation from both sides is really good, because not all of the characters are LGBTQ aligned, but not all of them are not. And then there's not more weighing this way or more weighing that way, because it takes more focus on the characters themselves opposed to the politics surrounding the characters that are in the book. And that's a nice, refreshing thing from how everything's been lately. So, the story being how it is fantastic. I love it. And I would say that it's probably one of my favorite books that I've read from... Let me go back and check. I haven't pulled it off my shelf in a little bit. I've been in the middle of trying to read Game of Thrones. It's probably my favorite book of last year, 2021. I love it. It's great. The only things that I would ever critique would be the settings that the characters are in, like describing what's going on around them. And the reason I say that is because it in my mind, it kind of lacks consistency of description. But I can also say that it's the first time that these two authors have published, and it's their first time teaming up. So I would consider this book a great success, being a first-time publishing, because I think it took steps much further than my own writing has. And I'm also a stickler that heavily relies on background because I lack the ability to write dialogue. That's my own personal critique of my stuff. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, this book threw me right back into high school, because it has... You can clearly tell where each character sits in the hierarchy that teens put themselves in. Like, you have the teens that walk around as the popular kids that think they run the school. Then you have the people that act like, since they're in sports, they can run the lunchroom specifically. Or you have the kids that think that there's such outcasts in the world that they can push other people around. And I think that it being so relatable for people, and it not being one of those things where it's such a fantasy that it's unperceivable to be in the real world at all. I'm sorry, again. Like, the story doesn't heavily focus around powers for the main character, but where it is a urban fantasy that includes superheroes, of course, superheroes and their powers take prevalence in the foreground of the story. And I like the amount of time that they spend inside the characters' minds themselves. And this is where I pull the similarity from My Hero Academia. Throughout the story, not only does the character grow as a person, and not only do they discover stuff about themselves, the characters' powers evolve throughout the story, as they encounter personal issues and move to compete with those said issues themselves. I think that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. And I'm probably sounding like a broken record at this point, but I think this book could change the face of young adult literature, specifically in the setting of urban fantasy, and if I need to go even further, with superheroes. And I hope the longer that this book is out, it will grow and change and collect more of an audience. And I hope that my personal review of the book will help. And this book can be found everywhere, I believe. I personally bought mine from Amazon, but I believe that this book was published through Ingram Spark, so it should be available everywhere. Yeah, it's published by Ingram Spark, so it's available in Barnes & Noble. It's available on Amazon and all of your favorite places to buy books and literature. Thank you for listening to my podcast. My name is Caleb, and welcome to Laying Lines. I'll see you in the next.